Hey everyone, welcome back to CA Dreams YouTube channel. So this is the part number 6 of CARO 2020 and we are going to start with the clause number 6. We have already covered the explanation of clause number 1 to 5, clause number 9 and clause number 10. Now we are going to move to our second memory technique, and in that we will discuss from clause number 6 to 16. So let's revise it. What was it about? It was about Nidhi. So Nidhi maintains cost records of the statutory dues and unrecorded income to prevent the company from fraud, and Nidhi's relative is the NRI. Okay, so let's start with clause number 6. Now clause number 6 talks about your cost records. Clause number 6 talks about cost records. So whether maintenance, now who is our client? Our client is PQI Limited, and who are we? We are the auditors. Okay, so whenever we are preparing the report of PQI Limited, so we have to check that whether maintenance of cost records has been specified by the central government under subsection 1 of section 148 of the Companies Act, and whether such accounts and records have been so made and maintained. That means whenever a company is supposed to maintain cost records, the company has to follow the provision of the section 148 subsection 1 of the Companies Act 2013. Okay, so as an auditor, we have to report that whether everything is as per the provision and whether the accounts have been properly maintained and recorded. Okay, so this is it, and this is the clause number 6. Okay, so clause number 6 is over and it is cost records. Now moving on to the 7th clause. It is about undisputed statutory dues. Okay, it is about undisputed statutory dues. So here what you have to report: whether the company is regular in depositing undisputed statutory dues including GST, Provident Fund, employee state insurance, income tax, sales tax, service tax, custom duty, excise duty, VAT and बहुत सारे other statutory dues to the appropriate authorities. And if not, the extent of arrears of outstanding statutory dues as on the last day of financial year concerned for the period of more than 6 months from the day they become payable shall be indicated. If you are a student of CA final and your articleship is going on, you must have prepared audit reports, tax audit reports a number of times. And in clause number 6, you will find that you have to report about the payables. You have to report about the payables, the total payables are in the company. Okay, so in that only you will find that there are two means in that clause 26 of tax audit report there are two further divisions, and one is about that whether the company has paid the payables till the end of financial year, and the another part talks about that whether there is the amount that the means you are showing as payable, because of course you are preparing the audit report as on 31st March. Okay, so you have to report that whether the company has paid the payables after 31st March or whether it has not paid. So you have to report accordingly. So here what you have to report when you are reporting as per CARO 2020, now you have to report that whether there is any undisputed statutory dues or whether there are any disputes, whether there are any arrears. Okay, so if the arrears are for greater than 6 months, that means suppose the payable of there is GST payable of PQR Limited today. What is the date today? Today is 12th February. 12th February, and from 12th February there has been 6 months and the company has not paid its dues. Okay, so therefore you have to report that, because this will become now a disputed statutory due. So you have to report that whether the company is regular in paying its dues or not. Okay, so you have to report about that. And where statutory dues referred to in subclause A have not been deposited on account of any dispute, then the amounts involved and the forum where dispute is pending shall be mentioned. A mere representation to the concerned department should not be treated as a dispute. So they are saying that if there is any mere representation to the concerned department, then it will not be a part of dispute. But if there is any dispute, then you have to mention the amount and the forum. That means suppose it is the dispute about GST. So the authority will be GST. If it is about income tax, then the income tax authority will be there. Okay, so accordingly you have to report. Okay, so they are saying that if from the last day of the financial year there has been more than 6 months from the date that they have become payable, then you have to indicate. Okay, let me explain you this line once again. Till here, what do they mean? Wait, let me find an eraser so that I can erase it for you. It is not possible to erase, I guess. This cannot be erased. So sorry for this. But please manage. I cannot erase the content that is written here already. Okay, let's read it once again. Let me make it more clear to you. So what is written here? Till here they are saying that whether the company is regular in depositing undisputed statutory dues, okay, to the appropriate authority, and if not, then you have to mention the extent of arrears of outstanding statutory dues as on the last day of the financial year concerned for a period of more than 6 months from the date they become payable shall be indicated. This line is very important. This line. If not, the extent of arrears of outstanding statutory dues as on the last day of the financial year concerned for a period of more than 6 months from the day they became payable shall be indicated. That means from the last day, what do they mean? They mean 31st March, because this is only the last day of the financial year, right? So you have to state that till this date, is there any due which is undisputed, which is disputed, which is in arrear for a greater than 6 months? That means till 31st March, is there any due which has been not paid, and that due, the period that it is due has exceeded 6 months. Okay, so if it is so, then you have to report it. ठीक है, इसको मैं एक बार हिंदी में भी बता देती हूँ. अगर लास्ट डे ऑफ द फाइनेंशियल ईयर तक कोई अरियर है, दैट मीन्स कंपनी ने जो उसका पेबल बन रहा था वो पे नहीं किया है टिल द लास्ट डे ऑफ द फाइनेंशियल ईयर, ठीक है, और उसको क्या हो गए हैं, 6 मंथ्स हो गए हैं, उस ड्यू को एरियर हुए हुए 6 मंथ हो गए हैं, 6 महीने से उसने वो पेबल नहीं पे किया है, देन यू हैव टू indicate it in your audit report. ठीक है ना? I hope you got this point. This was a very simple point, that if there is any disputed due and it has been greater than 6 months till the end of the financial year, till the last date of financial year, then you have to indicate, and you also have to indicate the amount and the forum involved. Okay. Now we have discussed two clauses. First was your cost record, that means 6th was your cost record, and 7th is your undisputed statutory dues. Now in 8th, you have to disclose the unrecorded income. You have to disclose about the unrecorded income. Okay, so whether any transaction not recorded in the books of accounts have been surrendered or disclosed as income during the year-end tax assessments under the Income Tax Act 1961, and if so, whether the previously unrecorded income has been properly recorded in the books of account during the year. So if there was any unrecorded income by PQR Limited and you got to know about it, you are the auditor, you got to know about it. So you have to report whether the transactions which have not been recorded in the books of account, have they been shown, are they shown separately? Are they shown separately as income? Okay. So you have to means check that whether the books of accounts, if it is not there, whether it has been surrendered or it has been disclosed as income in the tax assessments or not, and if so, whether the previously unrecorded income has been properly recorded in the books of accounts during the year. Okay, that means if in the previous year there was any unrecorded income, now is it properly shown it in the books of accounts or not? So you have to make sure about that. You have to report about that. Okay, now we have already discussed the 9th clause and the 10th clause. Now in the 11th clause, you have to report about fraud. So for fraud, so whether any fraud by the company or any company on the company has been noticed or reported during the year, if yes, the nature and the amount involved is to be indicated. That means if PQR Limited has done any fraud, okay, or PQR Limited, anyone else has done fraud. Okay, so any fraud by the company or any fraud on the company has been noticed or reported. That means here PQR Limited is involved in the fraud, एंड हेयर PQR लिमिटेड इज द विक्टिम ऑफ फ्रॉड. ठीक है, यहाँ पे उसने खुद किया है, यहाँ पे वो विक्टिम है. ठीक है, सो इफ इट इज सो then you have to report it and you have to indicate the nature and amount involved. Okay, now where any report under subsection 12 of section 143 of Companies Act 2013 has been filed by the auditors in form number ADT4 as prescribed under the rule. So they are saying that if there is any fraud involved, so whether it has been filed in form number ADT4 or not, because if you have noticed any fraud now, as an auditor, it is your responsibility to report it in form number ADT4. Okay, so this you have to check that whether you have properly reported it or not, and whether the auditor has considered whistleblower complaints, if any, received during the year by the company. Now, what do you mean by whistleblower complaints? What do you mean by whistleblower complaints? You can write it down. Whistleblower complaint means like secret complaints, or that means you are the auditor and you came to know about anything that was secret, that was kept secret, but now, as because you are aware of it, you cannot ignore it now. Okay, so this is what about whistleblower complaint. If it is so, that means if the company has received any whistleblower complaint, then you have to report about it. So you can write the proper meaning of it: knowledge of illegal activities. Like suppose I am the auditor of PQR Limited. I am doing the audit as per the books of accounts. But what happened? I was going to the market and I came to know about some illegal activity, that PQR Limited is doing this and this illegal activity. Okay, now because I have listened to that, I cannot ignore it. Okay, although it is not disclosed by PQR Limited in the books of accounts, but because I have listened it from somewhere else, I cannot ignore it. Okay, so if the auditor has considered any whistleblower complaints, if any, you have to, what you have to do, you have to report it. Okay, so whether the auditor has considered whistleblower complaints, if any, during the year by the company, if it is so, you have to report it in the audit report. Okay, then your 12th clause talks about Nidhi. So if it is a Nidhi company, you have to report that whether the Nidhi company has complied with the netted fund to deposits in the ratio of 1:20 to meet out the liability. That means the ratio of netted fund and deposits of Nidhi company should be 1:20. So you have to check that whether the ratio is complied with or not. Okay, then whether the Nidhi company is maintaining 10% of unencumbered deposits as in the Nidhi rules 2014, and also you have to report that whether there has been any default in payment of interest on deposits and repayment thereof for any period, and if so, you have to disclose the details. Okay, so this is applicable if the company is a Nidhi company. Okay, 1:20, 10% unencumbered deposits, and whether there is any default in payment of interest or repayment. This was a very, very simple point. Now in clause number 13, they are talking about related parties. So if there is any transactions with the related party, it should be in compliance with section number 177 and 188 of the Companies Act 2013, and also you have to disclose the details as per the accounting standards. Then clause number 14 talks about internal audit. So if the company has internal audit system commensurate with the size and nature of the business, and whether the reports of internal auditors for the period under audit were considered by the statutory auditor. So this you have to report. That means if the internal audit was done, is it proper? Is it according to the nature of the business? Is it according to the size of the business? You have to report about it. And also you have to report that what was the impact of the internal auditor's report in your audit. Okay, so you have to report about it. Then clause number 15 talks about non-cash transactions. So if there is any non-cash transactions by the company, that means in our case, if suppose PQR Limited is any non-cash transaction with its directors or any person which is connected to the company. Okay, so if it is so, you have to check that whether the company has complied with the provision of section number 192 or not. Then clause number 6 talks about your RBI. So if the company is required to be registered under section 45IA of RBI Act, so you have to check that whether the company has registered or not. If it is required to be registered, whether it is registered or not. Whether the company has conducted any non-banking financial or housing finance activity without a valid certificate of registration from the Reserve Bank, and whether the company is a core investment company as defined in the regulations made by RBI, and if so, whether it continues to fulfill the criteria of CIC, and in case the company is an exempted or unregistered CIC, whether it continues to fulfill such criteria, and whether the group has more than one CIC as a part of group. If yes, you have to indicate the number of CICs which are the part of group. So these are very simple points. RBI Act, according to RBI Act, you are required to comply with some conditions. So if it is a core banking, core investment company, then whether the regulations have been complied with or not. Okay, now whether the company has group of more than one CIC, so how many numbers are there? Then if the company has entered into any non-banking or housing finance activity without certificate of registration, you have to report. So all these things you have to report. Okay, in as per CARO 2020. Now, we have to start with a last memory technique, and also if I will find, then I will also show you a report, an audit report of CARO 2020, if possible, if I'll find of any real company, so that you can easily relate with all the clauses. Okay, so let's just quickly revise what was it about. The clause number 6 is about this. Close your eyes and remember, try to remember. Okay, clause number 6 talks about cash records. Clause number 6 talks about cash records. Clause number 7, undisputed statutory dues. Clause number 8, unrecorded income. Then 9th and 10th were about borrowings and companies fund. Then 11th talks about, clause number 11th talks about 4 for fraud. Then clause number 12 talks about Nidhi company. Then 13 talks about your related parties. Related was a NRI. NRI. What is N? Non-cash transactions. So which it is about your 15th clause. So it is actually 15, 16, 14. Okay, NRI 15, 16, 14. N for non-cash, then R for Reserve Bank, that is your clause number 16, and 14th is your internal audit, so it is the 14th clause. Okay, so cash records, then your cost records, undisputed statutory dues, unrecorded income, then borrowings, then your company's funds, then fraud, then Nidhi, then related party, and then NRI 15, 16, 14. NRI 15, 16, 14. Non-cash transactions, Reserve Bank, and your internal audit. Okay, so I hope you have learned the numbers from 6th to 16. Now let's just quickly revise clause number 1 to 5. Clause number 1, PP. Clause number 2, inventory. Clause number 3, investments. Clause number 4, clause number 3 is loans and advances. Clause number 4 is investments, and clause number 5 is your deposit. Okay, so I hope that now you have learned all the clauses along with names and numbers till 16. We will continue from the 17th clause from the next part. So probably that will be the last part, and if I will show you the audit report, then it may be the second last part as well. Okay, so I'm ending this video here, and we will continue with the next part.